Hello and welcome to a very special episode of Harmonious World for International Women's Day 2025. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and this podcast is inspired by a Quincy Jones quote: "Imagine what a harmonious world it would be if everyone shared a little of what they're good at." And I'm delighted that for this episode I'm joined by Claire Cope, who is a pianist and a composer, and her album Every Journey includes her Ensemble C group of musicians, which we will talk about, I'm sure, during our conversation. Later today, I'm going to be at the album launch at the wonderful Jazz Cafe Posc in Hammersmith. And there will be a review of that gig as well as this podcast coming out later on. So I hope you enjoy listening to my conversation with Claire Cope. What you're listening to now is the title track from the Ensemble C album Every Journey. Hi, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you? Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too. I'm very excited for this. I'm excited to see you at Cafe Posc as well in
Oh, it's so great you can come. Thank you so much. That's brilliant.
Well, welcome, Claire Cope, to the latest episode of Harmonious World. This is a real pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to talk to you.
So this is going out on International Women's Day 2025.
Fantastic.
Which coincides with the release of the album, which is called Every Journey.
Absolutely.
Right. So I know the story behind this album. Let's start by you telling my listeners about it.
Sure, I'd love to. So, the kind of concept of this album is all about kind of taking the first step on a big journey. Not necessarily a physical journey, but that's the kind of concept of kind of having the courage to take the first step towards something. And that kind of being the hardest part of any journey, taking that first step. But what kind of brought this all together was discovering incredible stories of kind of historical female explorers and adventurers. And these are quite unknown stories. And I discovered some of them through the writing of author and explorer Jackie Hill Murphy. And she's written a couple of books, one called Adventuresses and one called The Extraordinary Tales of Kate Marsden. And in those books, she retraces the kind of actual journey physically of these women who kind of did things that back then, you know, of course, people would never think that women would be capable of doing such things. And then, of course, those stories were not really passed down in the way that stories about male explorers have been. So that's kind of, I was really drawn into, these finding out about these incredible, brave women. So some of the pieces on the album are directly inspired by some of those stories. And then I kind of brought it all together and and it kind of became about this having no limits and kind of, you know, um, about being brave and courageous and taking the first step towards something.
Yeah. Before we start having a conversation, listeners will have been able to hear a clip from Every Journey brackets has a beginning,
Okay.
which is the
Yep.
opening track, isn't
That
it,
is.
on this
Yeah,
album? And
absolutely.
I think it really beautifully shows off the whole ensemble, and that in itself is an interesting story as well, isn't it?
Yeah. So um, for this album, I knew I wanted a big sound. So I had released an album back in 2020. It was my first album with this ensemble, but it was a septet back then. So there was 7 musicians. As soon as I had released that, I knew I wanted to expand the band for this album. So this is now an 11-piece band. Um, and I've kind of brought together a number of musicians from across the UK. So there are musicians that are based in London, here in the Northwest, and then in Scotland as well. So, and these are all musicians who I, admire so much. Um, so yeah, I'm really pleased with how I kind of grew the sound, basically. And that first track, it features the incredible guitar playing of Ant Law, who is, really one of the most brilliant guitarists in the UK for sure, and further afield. And so that kind of became a bit of a piece for him, really inspired by um, the amazing music of Pat Metheny, who I'm a huge fan of. I wanted to start the album quite atmospherically rather than in a more punchy way. That happens kind of later on. So it's quite a slow build, that piece, but it was kind of reflecting, like I guess certainly my personal musical journey, how things take a long time. It takes a long time to kind of discover who you are and what you want to do. And I think this is the case with this album being a journey in itself. And that piece kind of reflects that in the way I tried to pace it.
Yeah, and I think it's a very interesting start, isn't it, to the journey
Yeah,
that is
yeah,
this album. And I think that's the thing, isn't it, with these incredible stories you've got of the women behind the album, but they all started with one step.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Um, so I should say that I listen a lot to a podcast called the Tough Girl Podcast. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I
It's
do know that one, yeah.
Sarah Williams. That's actually how I think that's how I heard of Jackie Hill Murphy, who is the author, because I think she was a guest on that podcast. Um, but yeah, one of her mottos on it is kind of like, you know, how to go out of your comfort zone. And it's just about doing that first thing, the very first thing. Like, I don't know, if you want to go out for a walk or a run, put on your trainers. That's the first thing you've got to do. So yeah, that's kind of the inspiration behind that. I mean, some of these stories are just so dramatic and so unbelievable. It's hard not to be so in awe of, just the courage of these people. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, that brings me to I want to play a bit from
Yes.
that Nabongo feeling.
Yes. Great. Yeah. This is inspired by a living explorer, actually. So this is inspired by Jessica Nabongo, who became the first documented Black woman to travel to all 195 countries on the planet. And she's written a really beautiful book that I think was published with National Geographic called Catch Me If You Can. She's an amazing photographer as well, so there's loads of beautiful photos in there. Um, but yeah, so this tune is all about just the joy of exploration, travel, discovering new things. What she's really good at, I think, is highlighting, countries where we might have associated certain things because of what we've learnt about those countries. Places we might deem unsafe because we've been told they're unsafe, or because of political situations, etc. And so we might not know so much about all the fantastic things about those places, culture, food, art. And she's so good at kind of, I think, have written about these places that perhaps were difficult for her to travel to, but deserve our attention, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's just a great story about, what an amazing achievement, um, a massive, massive thing to have done.
Because you have got the drummer John Ormston on this album, and I've heard him play a few times with sax
Brilliant.
player Tim Boniface.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they work together quite a lot, I
Yes,
think. He's
yes.
a great drummer, isn't he?
He's a fantastic drummer.
He's very kind of reserved, but when it needs to, he kind of gets in there. He's a great
Absolutely.
man. Yeah.
I totally agree with you. Yeah, this one features him a little bit at the end. And when we play this live, we kind of extend that a little bit, which is fun. He's an amazing drummer. I've known John since I was studying at music college. When we were like 19, 20, I met him a long, long time ago. He's one of the most musical people I know. I mean, he only plays what's musical and meaningful, and but yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's constantly listening, he's constantly reacting. He's just so much fun to play with. Um, and him and Jack, so Jack McCarthy is playing percussion because I knew I wanted on this just a lot of percussion. And what they do together is, I mean, yeah, it's just fantastic.
Yeah. And I like the percussive side. It sometimes there are times when it uh sort of counterbalances your piano, which tends to be very kind of melodic, and it
Yes.
and it enhances it but goes against it in a way that's really
Yeah,
interesting.
sure. Yeah. I'm glad that that comes across because I wanted there to be a lot of contrast on this
Yeah.
album. And I think with having this, there's 11 people inputting and so many different ideas. And so you do get so much color. Um, and obviously, I was like experimenting with texture a lot, which you can do the bigger the ensemble gets, which is great. Um, but yeah, that Nabongo feeling in particular is quite a It's one where I was definitely playing more with texture. There's a lot of kind of individual lines in the horn section, especially, and then things coming in and out of the guitar part. So everyone's not always together in this one. So it's slightly chaotic at times, but I wanted it to be just a really busy and active sound all the time. Um, yeah, and I think that kind of came across quite well. And then the percussion just adds so much to that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. Yeah. Um, so Maria Schneider is a great influence on you. She's an amazing woman, isn't she?
She is. She's incredible. She's just, yeah, I'm completely in awe of her. I actually didn't discover her music until quite late on in my journey, probably not until, I don't know, maybe about 5 years ago. Or whenever around the time that Data Lords came out and,
Yeah, which was
and that
5
was
years
her,
ago. Yeah.
yes, okay. And then I kind of obviously the obsession took hold and then I listened to everything for
Yeah.
months and months and months. And I just absorbed so much from just listening and listening and listening. And what she does, I mean, I think that one of the greatest skills of any composer is pacing and structure and knowing what feels right when to change something, when to not change something, when to add something, when to not add something. And I think she has just so much musical integrity as well, as in, she just lets the music go where it needs to go. It's so organic, it grows so organically. Some of her pieces are 8 minutes, I know some are 20 minutes. It's just, yeah, it's really, really inspiring.
Yeah. I interviewed her
Yes,
in 2020. She was one of my
amazing.
first. Yes, I know. And
Fantastic.
and I always use her as an example of somebody who, if we didn't have the lockdowns, I would never have been able to speak to her. I've I've
Right.
been I've been trying to talk to her because she's
Yeah.
coming to the UK next week, and I've
Oh,
been
is
trying to
she?
talk to her, and she's just
Okay.
so busy, she
Yes,
just can't fit it in. And
sure.
it's like, I'm just glad that I had that chance when Data Lords
Absolutely.
came out, and that feels like a really big moment in
Yeah.
music, that
Yeah.
Data Lords album, and I'm so glad she's touring that with the Oslo Orchestra now,
That's
and that's who she's
fantastic.
coming to the Barbican with. So
Right. Okay. Oh, I actually didn't know that. That's fantastic.
yeah,
Um, yeah, it's absolutely quite a monumental album as well. And I think she is this emblem of what we should all be striving for in the music industry. And it's a really difficult situation we've got now with streaming and Spotify and playlists and all the things that people are starting to be hemmed in by in their music making. And of course, she'd already grown a good audience and a good following. So you could say she was able to kind of say, I'm not doing that in an easier way
yeah,
than, the next generation. It's very difficult. But I I always, will I have so much respect for what she's doing and and the value she places on music and that she obviously, as we all know, should be placed on music. And I just hope that, well, we all hope that something happens and something changes and that, we can all kind of follow suit with that. So yeah, I have just such huge respect for her and amazing that also just to say something that isn't on Spotify won a Grammy or two
yeah.
Grammys,
2 Grammys, I think.
right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's just, it gives you some hope for the future of the music industry, if that's still possible.
Absolutely. And I think that audiences have to start going, do you know what? I could listen to it on Spotify, but I would rather listen to, buy the album.
Yes,
And that's why I always, when I put links in the show notes, I always put links to the best place for the
yes,
artist. So
yes, yeah,
sometimes that's Bandcamp, because Bandcamp is a really
yeah.
good thing, I
That's
think.
Bandcamp is excellent.
But if people can buy an album direct from the artist, that's the best way of, putting money into the artist so that they can produce more work.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's such a huge problem at the moment.
Yeah.
And it is that thing of people people are forgetting that music is something that has a monetary value and that that's okay. I think I grew up still with buying CDs and it being a huge deal and knowing, oh, okay, or a single costs 3.99 and a CD, an album costs 9.99, and you wait for the release day and then you can buy it, and that's the only place you can listen to
Yeah.
it and on the radio. But you've bought your copy and that's been given that
Yeah.
money. And obviously that's been forgotten about because everyone can access music wherever they want to. So I think you're absolutely right that it's kind of retraining people to understand that this music isn't coming from nowhere. It
Yeah.
it costs an awful lot to make music. And I think probably musicians forget, I sometimes do, that a lot of people who aren't musicians haven't been told or don't know about what places like Spotify are doing. They actually don't know how damaging it is. And it's not really their fault because, this is just something that's happened and we've all kind of gone along with it and no one's done anything about it. So yeah, I think it's absolutely Bandcamp is doing a great job, really excellent. And I think that's got a pretty decent following now. So I think if we can keep pushing that, and wherever you can, if there's music you love and maybe you're streaming it a lot, just buy the album once and then you've done your bit, and that's
Yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah. Because I think there's also a problem with all of those streaming services, which is in terms of people choosing music, people selecting music that they enjoy and then finding out more about that artist. Because what
Yes,
happens is they listen to one thing and then before they know it, something else has come up and they've
yes,
gone down a different rabbit hole.
yeah,
And I think that's a real concern because I think, people who are fans of music of particular artists, that is almost going because you just listen to so much from different people
yeah.
and it's just a
I,
real shame.
I think that's such a good point. I totally agree. Yeah, it's like too much all the time, and then you've got the whole kind of concentration span issue because of what, you know, TikTok and algorithms
Yeah.
and, all of that is doing. But yeah, it is really sad. I mean, I remember I absolutely loved that kind of journey of discovery with music when I was growing up. You know how I'd find something on the radio, maybe. I'd be like, oh, next time I'm in HMV, I'll go to the jazz section or whatever and see,
Absolutely.
and you have that great time like looking through the CDs, or you might pick something up and go, oh, they're playing on that. I heard them in that. Let's check that out, and it
Yeah.
kind of is this rolling thing. And that just, I have such good, fond memories of doing that and finding so much music kind of organically in that way. And then yeah, that's how then those people grow an audience and have fans so yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree with you.
Yeah. So Maria Schneider's Data Lords is all about that. The whole
Yes.
album is about that. And I mean, going back to your album, I mean, I think it's lovely when there is something, you've got something to say. And I think this coming out, particularly on International Women's Day, is really important because it doesn't matter what you do. Every journey begins with a
Yeah.
single step.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
this feels like such an important step on your journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's very meaningful to me personally, having made this music. I mean, it's 5 years since I made the last album, and it's taken me a really long time to get here with this because it's been such a big project. But I also became a mum midway through that. So in 2021, I had my daughter. Um, and she kind of, having her really inspired me actually to really take that step. Um, you know, it's quite hard. So I went to music college when I was, between 18 and 22, and it's such a kind of intense experience. And I spent a large part of my mid to late 20s kind of feeling a bit lost as a musician because I'd just come through such an intense experience. And I just didn't really know what my identity was as a musician. I trained as a classical pianist, but, you know, I loved improvising and I loved jazz and I really liked trying to write music. And I just didn't quite know how I fitted in anywhere. But as I kind of got towards being 30 and then was thinking about having a baby and all these things, it all kind of happened at once that I really realized that what my passion is composing. And that really kind of unlocked such a huge thing for me. It was just, it was a real kind of epiphany moment. And um, I guess I'm a big believer as well in women being able to be mothers if they want to and work. And I kind of just want to show that, what's possible, hopefully. I'm not kind of I'm not, an emblem for that, but you know what I mean? I think it's really important that women see other women doing things, just if that makes sense. I think the visibility thing
Definitely.
is so important. And, often, I think women are made to feel like they need to choose between certain things in life. It's still an issue. Um, and yeah, I'm trying to do both. And my daughter's really inspired me to kind of be a good role model for her. And for me, that's kind of saying, no, I want to do this and I'm going to do it. And so that's kind of how it comes back to being inspired by these amazing stories of women who were in far more difficult circumstances and still found a way to get where they wanted to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important that you're releasing this on International Women's
Yes.
Day, and then the launch date is at Cafe Posc
Yes.
later on today when this is going out. Um,
Fantastic.
I think Cafe Posc is a great place for they've been allowing a lot of women actually. I
Yeah.
mean, there's more of us about that allowed to do what we do. And
Yeah.
Cafe Posc is one of those places that's kind of, giving us a stage.
Yeah, definitely. It's a great venue. I'm really,
Yeah.
really delighted that we're playing there. Thomas has been so,
Oh, he's
um,
lovely, isn't he?
yeah, he's fantastic. He's been so supportive. He's so enthusiastic about the music and the album. And, and he knows how amazing all these 10 musicians are that I'm playing with. So, he appreciates that it's a really fantastic band. Yeah, I completely agree. They've got a great program throughout the year.
Yeah. So you've got an amazing group of 10 musicians with you. How did you select those and who have you got?
Yes, great question. So I've got Brigitte Baraha, who's singing. Um, she's very active on the music scene, both here and in Europe. But I mean, I first discovered her on a big band album by Ruben Fowler, like years and years ago. And she'd also written some beautiful lyrics for a song on that. And I was just completely drawn into her voice and her sound. She has such a unique sound, but she is so versatile. And she's so much fun to work with. So I am just so delighted that she's on this album. She brings so much to it. And yeah, and she wrote the beautiful lyrics for The Birch and the Larch, which is the third track on the album. It's the only one that has any lyrics. And she did a brilliant job with that. And then there's Freddie Gavita on the trumpet, someone I've known and kind of admired for a long time. I mean, he's played with everyone, I think,
Yeah.
in all sorts of groups. He's absolutely brilliant player, brilliant improviser. Also Mike Soper, who is on trumpet and also flugelhorn. I didn't know Mike until a few years ago, but I heard his own album come out and I was really blown away by his own music and his playing. So yeah, I was really pleased that he wanted to do it as well. Anushka Nongi is a trombonist from Scotland. She's it's done super well establishing herself there and now in London. I mean, she's really active in some amazing bands, and great improviser. She's so young. She's just, yeah, I mean, I have so much respect for her. She's brilliant. Matt Carmichael is on tenor sax, again, based in Scotland. So, yeah, kind of one of the ideas was of getting all these people together was bringing together different musical scenes. So, like the Scottish jazz scene, London jazz scene, and then Manchester as well. So, Anushka and Matt are were both based in Glasgow. But yeah, Matt's an incredible tenor sax player. His sound is just unbelievable. Amazing improviser. My husband, Rob Coate, plays bass clarinet, barry sax, and flute. He's incredible at doubling on all those instruments. He's so versatile. And he didn't really have a choice because I asked him to do all of that, but yeah, he loves it, so it's fine. Ant Law on guitar, as I mentioned Ant before, incredible guitarist, incredible improviser, and he's brought so much to this album. I'm so grateful to him. Gavin Barris is on double bass. He's based in Manchester. Amazing player. He plays a lot with Matt Housel, so they've done some quite big tours. John Ormston on drums. And Jack McCarthy on percussion. And yeah, he's just an incredible percussionist. He brought so many ideas to this album. I mean, we talked a bit about what we might do on it, but a lot of it is just him saying, let's try this, let's try that. And it's just fantastic.
Yeah. Brilliant. And it really is an amazing collection of musicians. And I think it's increasingly difficult for composers and band leaders to have big ensembles.
Yes.
But it really works. And so, well, good on you for making it happen.
Thank you. Yeah, it is a huge challenge. I was lucky to get a little bit of money from the Arts Council to kind of start rehearsing it. Had it not been for that, it would have been extremely difficult to even start this, but that was very helpful. But yeah, I mean, you do need a big budget for something like this. So I'm glad we kind of got to the end somehow. Yeah, I'm really pleased with it.
Yeah. Well done. And
thank you.
When this comes out, people will be heading to Cafe Posc to see the launch.
Brilliant.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. And thank you for joining me for this special for International Women's Day. It's a great thing to talk about.
It's been so great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Claire Cope. It was really special to be joined by her for International Women's Day. And I'm heading out, as you listen to this, I'm heading out to hear the album launch at Cafe Posc in London. Sorry, add this one in. So as part of our conversation, we talked about Maria Schneider and John Ormston. Do take a listen to the podcast episode where I interview Maria Schneider, and also where I talk to Tim Boniface, who is another great musician, and he uses John Ormston as drummer as well. So thank you for joining me once more for Harmonious World. Have a great week. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.